Hello, this is Yaakov Kronenberg from Jerusalem, and tonight we're going to be doing another class in our series of classes on Aquarius ascendant and Saturn in the different signs. Tonight we'll be doing Saturn in Cancer. Another interesting combination, because here Saturn is not... Saturn is difficult in Cancer, because Cancer it's in detriment in Cancer. It doesn't work so good in Cancer. Cancer is a sign of youth, and Saturn is a sign of old age, right? Cancer rules the first 2 years of life. Saturn rules the last years of life, and so they're completely different energies. Cancer rules the home. Saturn, it wants to be out at work. So when you put them together, it's not a good combination. And especially in an Aquarian rising chart, because then you'll have Saturn in the 6th house. So you'll have it two negatives, what they call in the Talmud, shtayim l'riuta. Like a double thing, it's like two things that are no good, right? One, it's in detriment, and then second, it's in a bad house. So it works towards illnesses and servitude and debt, problems like that. And so you would think that a person would have difficulty that had that ascendant. I know a few people that had that in my career that have that combination, and they all have all had a lot of problems. But tonight I'm going to show you a chart of somebody who actually is very, very famous. At one time was one of the most famous men around in America, in TV, in television. And he had an unusually successful career in married life, everything for somebody in Hollywood. And so we're going to talk about his chart. The truth is, when I looked at his chart, I said, this can't be his chart. He's got such a difficult thing. But we'll come back to it in a minute. First, let's look at the Saturn there. When you have Saturn in the 6th house, it indicates a ruling planet. There's a certain element of servitude in here, that you don't have such good feelings about yourself, especially when it's in detriment. Right, and it's also going to be a connection with a career connected to, you want to express yourself in a 6th house way, through service, helping other people, and things like that. And Saturn in Cancer a lot of times indicates difficulties in the home life, especially in the early home life, especially problems with the mother, because the early home life and the mother are ruled by Cancer. And when it's in the sign of Saturn, there would be some kind of difficulty there. And so, I want to do a chart tonight. It's a really interesting chart. I like I said before, I was almost not going to use it. And then, I looked up in one of the encyclopedias about the man. His name was Henry Winkler. Actually, is Henry Winkler. He's still alive. And he was, at one time, he was maybe the biggest star in television, especially for, the teenage group people back then, in the 60s or 70s, I don't remember. And so I looked at his chart, and he had, I just read in the encyclopedia there that, he's still acting today. He must be in his late 60s, and he's very successful. He's been married for 30 years, over 30 years, which is something sensational for Hollywood, and he has a few kids even, and everything. Loaded with money. So how can he have the ruling planet Saturn in detriment in the 6th house? And not only that, but the planet that rules his career, Mars, also in the 6th house, in Cancer, and also in fall. It's not so good. It's very weak Mars, right? It's in fall, and it's in a bad house. I said, well, how can this be? And I was about ready to give up. I looked at it. The only thing I could find in the encyclopedia was that, he had maybe a difficult... His parents gave him a lot of trouble. He's had a strained relation with his parents for many, many years. Now they passed away because he had dyslexia when he was young, and because of that, his father used to call him the dumb dog and stuff like that. And so he very strained relationship. But that's not enough to it doesn't answer my question. How can you have the two planets, ruler of 1 and 10, in detriment and fall in a bad house, and yet have such success? It was a question to me. And so, I dug deeper, and I found out, some interesting facts. We'll talk about it in a second. But the first thing I want to say is, if I look at his career, if I look at him, you remember that Uranus is the secondary planet in the chart, the secondary ruler. We haven't talked too much about it. But a lot of times when the ruling planet is unconnected to the ascendant, like here, Saturn being the ruling planet is 6 signs away from the ascendant, doesn't make an aspect to the ascendant. It's like the person somehow is a little bit out of touch with that element of his life. And so maybe in that situation, the Uranus, if it is in good aspect to the ascendant, it'll take over a lot of the slack of the bad Uranus, the bad Saturn, excuse me. As you look at his Uranus, he has his Uranus in the 5th house, the house of career and acting. Well, it's in the 4th house, but it's in the 5th sign in Gemini. And so it's connected strong with the 5th house, which is theater, acting, children, all sorts of, right, especially children, theater, acting, things like that. And if you look at the chart, he has Jupiter and Venus, the two benefics, in the 9th house, an excellent house. So they're incredibly strong. His Venus is an honor, and it's exactly conjunct his Jupiter. And the two of them make a very tight aspect, trine aspect to his Uranus. And that seems to be, to me, where he was so charismatic and so, such a sensational success in TV, I think is coming from there. But then you still have the problem, well, what about his Saturn and Mars? So I investigated further, and I found out that he's tremendously involved in organizations and philanthropy and things like that help children. Right? He's involved in an organization for children with epilepsy. He made all sorts of films and public service things for children who like underprivileged children. And he must be involved in any number of organizations that are involved with helping children. And so you see, he turned around a lot of the negative energy of a childhood, and he used it really to build a good life. He actually stayed married. I guess he worried about his children, that they should be good and have a good life. And then he actually spent all that energy over the years working for children. And that's the Aquarian, by the way, the Aquarian ascendant. Remember, we always say the Aquarian is groups and organizations. And here, because it's in the 6th house, is connected with health, right? And in Cancer, children. And so he was also, on the other hand, it's a major part of his life is the dealing with and helping children. And so that answered my question. How can he have? You don't see any Saturn Mars in his chart, and both of them in that. And by the way, if you look at it, Saturn Mars is still a difficult combination in any case. But if you look at it, the Saturn and Mars give itself up to the Moon, which isn't the greatest, because the Moon is in the 8th house. But the Moon gives itself up to the final depositor, which is Mercury, which is exactly on the midheaven. So eventually that he becomes famous also for that, and he has the sun also in the sign of the 10th house, so he became a tremendously successful man. But still, he was very lucky that he was able to, use his skills to make positive out of Mars and Saturn. I actually say, I've helped a lot of people in my teacher used to say that the real correction for if you see somebody's got a lot of bad planets in the 6th house, health troubles and things like that, is try to get them into a career like a doctor, to become to help people, and through that you can use your negative energy up. There's a 6th house, you can either be sick or you can be a doctor. So if you see the person sick, you try to get them to be a doctor, maybe or to somehow work in that field. And he went in and he went in and took over and helped people, children especially, that were underprivileged, they were ill and needed help. And he turned his mazel around, and very interesting, and I thank everybody for listening.